between teachers and young children are critical drivers of development and learning. And, you know, it's often hard to say, like, what's good teaching? I always get asked that. I know, like, Melody probably has been asked that same thing several times. It's like, how do you know good teaching? How do you describe good teaching? There's just like, it's hard to kind of wrap it all around there. And so, you know, interactions are one way that we can take a look at that, because the interactions between adults and children can be objectively measured. They can be observed, measured, and used to inform progress. That's what class does, and that's why it's so powerful. In the authors of class, it's important to mention that they did not invent good teaching. We know that, right? That is not what this is about. But what they did do, they developed a way to quantify and measure good teaching, and that's important to know. And class, the tool and the class itself, is the most researched tool that measures teacher-child interactions, and the class is the gold standard assessment of interactions. And class, you might be familiar with, it's often used, it is used by the Office of Head Start for monitoring, and it's also used extensively as part of 23 states in their QRS systems across the United States. So really powerful impact of class we see. Next slide, Gloria. So what is continuous quality improvement? So I'm not going to do all the talking, I promise. So I know I am among experts in this space. So I thought I would like give you an opportunity to interact and say, what comes to your mind when you hear the question, what is continuous quality improvement? What's a buzzword that you immediately think about? What would describe continuous quality improvement? You could put that in the chat box and that question area and call those out. And I'm going to lift a few of those up just as some of the things that I see and hear and associate also with continuous quality improvement. So take a second there and pop those in there. It's one of those definitions that, you know, if we were to put it on paper, you know, that would be an easy way to write like 20 pages, I think, because it's hard not to stop once you get started about what it is. It's almost easier to describe what it's not, less words, right? So as you're putting those in there, that's great. I'll put Melody on the spot and she can tell us, like, Melody, 2 words. What are the top 2 words you think about if you were to describe continuous quality improvement?
Wow, I would say ongoing.
Ongoing.
And a culture of learning, both of those things.
Love those. And I see such great other ideas happening. I think that ongoing, definitely, I lift that one up. Data driven, you got to kind of know, like, you got to have a way to kind of take a pulse at what's happening and where we're going, where we're headed, how far do we got to go to get there. Reflective makes me think about a systematic approach for improving quality, so that it's not just being done in isolation, but it's connected to all the other things we're doing. It's very cyclical. I think that you need to keep in mind that it's not linear. So as you go, you learn new things. I think that's what Melody just said. As you learn, you think about, like, do we keep doing that? Do we adjust? Do we stop? Do we add like different supports? And just that constant dialogue about that and having those feedback loops. So you could have continuous quality improvement within your own classroom. You could have that between the people you work with at an everyday basis. You could have it, you can pull it out and say as a school improvement. Lots of schools are focused on improvement. Programs, we can bring it up even higher, state level, higher ed. So there's lots of spaces. It could also be used as a whole ecosystem of improvement when we really do it well. So lots of things around this topic. But I wanted to kind of zero in today to think about, like, how can CQI work with class, and what does that exactly look like? What does it mean, and what's possible? So when I think about continuous quality improvement with class, I definitely think of it as a system that drives improvement in the interactions that matter the most and provides supports all educators need to improve. It's one thing to collect data. It's one thing to have a focus and then to point out, like, okay, here's our strengths. Here's what we need to grow in, but then to have no supports to help us get there. So as a system of supports, it's got to work together and very cohesively. And then with class in the space of CQI, we have the advantage of having the measurement tools of class that can provide reliable, consistent data points that illustrate the quality of interactions across the classrooms, within the program, as well as across programs, across states, across organizations. I mean, it can really spread that system view, right? And it can drive individual and programmatic quality improvement. And that's what I think is really a strength of seeing class in the CQI space. Next slide, Gloria. So you've heard us talk about data, and data can be used in different ways. We've heard about accountability data. You might be thinking about improvement data, and then you might be thinking about how does this come together? Like, which one are you talking about in a CQI approach? And it depends on your lens you come at this with. You might need a shift in your approach, or you're like, nope, that's exactly how I see this working together. So it could be a shift, or it's just an acknowledgement of the way you see it. So in this visual, what I love about this is looking at the center. If we really remain centered on equity, we're really focused on a continuous quality improvement, because we need to really thoughtfully think about how we are ensuring equitable quality for all children and all teachers, and I would say in all families and communities. And so when I think about that, we have to have an accountability, because those kids, those families, communities are counting on us. And no matter what role you play, they're counting on us. So we have to have this accountability that we are going to work at this. We're going to improve, and we're at different stages. I think that's what's important for me to acknowledge. We are all on this journey, and we enter it at different points, but we are all committed to getting there and making sure that we're doing everything possible to bring that to children, teachers, and families. But in that same sense, that you have to have data that is addressing how well you're doing. Celebrate the wins along the way, because it's easy to only look for it at the end of a year assessment, a one-time only focus of like, here's the quality, we're going to snapshot it now, and then we won't look at it again until next year or whenever that happens. But this is like really a commitment to every day thinking about, what did our data tell us? What did our data not tell us? That's powerful in itself. Like, what's the context? What's the story around this? What else should we know about this? And so bringing those things in. And so that's why this really fits nicely into the Plan, Do, Study, Act process of a CQI. But I love the blue ring around the outside of this visual, because it takes informal and formal data collection. And informal can be those conversation feedback loops. You're just talking about it with other teachers, teachers talking to teachers, teachers talking to coaches, teachers, coaches talking to principals and leaders, and then lifting those up. So that's what it's empowering about this process as we think about it. And one of the things that I think that class and CQI can have as a powerful approach is that it really can give an opportunity to have how data and improvement supports can work in an integrated way instead of isolated. So we want to make sure that what the data tells us, then we give those supports that are needed to grow. And it's this ongoing process. And so like, I think that having the tools and resources are just as important as having the data that tells us that. So you might be saying, whoa, that was a whole lot, Darlene, and you are so right. So if you were told tonight at dinner, as you're having dinner, hey, I heard you went to this webinar about CQI in class. Like, I mean, like, what is that about? So I want you to have some really good talking points that are quick, easy, that you're going to summarize that with. So if you had to tell them at dinner before, you know, the main entree comes your way, you're going to say that CQI in class, it focuses on interactions that those are the heart of great teaching. It promotes data-driven impact in an ongoing process of monitoring that includes formal and informal data collection. It gives consistency of looking at quality across birth to secondary spaces. I mean, that's powerful, because we often be like, well, how do I look at this along a continuum? And how do I set improvement goals across that? It offers comprehensive role-based professional development. It supports integration and scale across an organization or program. And last but most importantly, it defines an equitable approach to quality. So that's your dinner time conversation. To share that later. Next slide, because I'm going to give it to Melody, because I think that we've talked a lot about what CQI is, the benefits and the approach so far, but like, you really got to kind of begin by creating a culture of CQI, and she has a lot to share in this space that I think you'll benefit from. So Melody, all you.
Darlene, thank you for that introduction, for just helping us revisit how class can really fit into this notion of continuous quality improvement, which I believe all early childhood practitioners, no matter what the level they happen to be practicing in, want to grow. I really feel like early childhood people want to know how to, know how to do their craft better. And so class really allows for a common language. If I can say one thing that programs or coaches or districts can walk away with, is that early childhood spaces are messy, and they're messy not just in the materials that are used or should be used, or the environments, or the noise level, or the back and forth, activity that's happening, but following a teacher's line of teaching, which really should actually be focused on what the children are learning, right? Good teaching really is measured by what the children are learning and how they learn. Class gives us a lens to view these early childhood laboratories in. These classrooms are almost like laboratories where lots of people are doing lots of things and there are lots of different activity going on. And every teacher has their own style of participating in those laboratories. But what class does, or has done for our program, is it really helped us hone the language around the indicators and the dimensions, the domains that are necessary in a high quality early childhood classroom, particularly in a preschool classroom, and has allowed us that language, that vocabulary, those behaviors, for us really to have strong definition, so that when we are speaking to district level leaders, which I kind of straddle that space between a district level leader and as well as on the ground, boots on the ground kind of practitioner, it gives us a solid foundation for what we see happening in the classroom. And in our particular program, we have a lot of people visit and a lot of people come to see us on many different levels of the work. And we use a lot of the class language to describe what's happening in our classrooms. And so it's given us just that common language. And I think a lot of what I just said about early childhood classrooms is thinking about the many hats teachers wear in a classroom, or even coaches, the many hats coaches wear, or program directors or district leaders. And they bring lots of different lenses to the work. And given that, and that's a good thing, because good teams are made up of a diverse set of people who are working toward the same goal. But what class does is allow these perspectives to come together and really look at the work through a united lens, yet different perspectives. Maybe if you're working in a district that's large and you have teachers and coaches and directors and supervisors at the table, everyone has a different lens on the work, but a different perspective on the work because of the role in which they sit. But class really helps us to, get that lens narrowed onto those high quality behaviors that we like to see happening in our preschool and early childhood classrooms. Before we even can come, in my mind, can begin to talk about using class as a continuous quality improvement skill, it is to think about the cultures in which our programs exist, and this idea of a reflective mindset that Darlene talked about when she thought about, what are some words that might describe continuous quality improvement. Building a culture or a program that is reflective in nature is critical to using the data or using the information that you can retrieve from class observations. Our program is extremely reflective, so much so that I think it's just built into the teachers' beings, in that they will go home and the next day come back and say, you know what, I was thinking yesterday, and this is what I think happened in my classroom. This is why we, had this particular issue. That's reflection. That is really just granular, reflection, and thinking about what's happening in the classroom and what are those pieces that surround the classroom context. So when we have that type of a mindset as individual teachers, and when I use the word teachers, I really want everyone to know that I'm using that not just in the lead for the lead teachers, but also for the assistants that are in the classrooms. In our program, we call them co-teachers, because they really wear that hat. They are so critical to a lot of that back and forth responsive nature in a large preschool classroom, that our co-teachers, our assistant teachers, also need to have this reflective mindset where they want to grow and learn. I talked just a little bit about that established language that gives us this commonality between all the teachers in the program, or the teachers and the co-teachers, or within classrooms. It also helps us in a way that in our particular program, we use it as a continual continuous quality improvement plan rather than an evaluative um, uh, process, meaning that we're not really conducting class as an evaluation of such, but rather as an investigation of what is happening within classrooms. And we've found, or I've found from in my program, that it has really supported teachers and empowered them to identify aspects of their own practice, to support one another, to strengthen that support between one another about strategies or issues that may surround some of the data that we are looking at, and that through that empowerment, that teachers are really they really are putting themselves out there and being transparent about what they feel like they are needing extra supports in, and where they feel strong as compared to what the data is showing. So sometimes there can be some different perspectives there as far as looking at it through the class lens and then looking at it through what a teacher thinks or feels. And so sometimes that's just a great space to grow in, to think, oh wow, I really didn't know that my language modeling was as strong as it is. I thought I asked more open-ended questions and those kinds of things. So that kind of data can be reflective to help teachers say, what can I do tomorrow in my classroom based on our conversation around the class implementation within our classrooms. And the other thing is the supports that Darlene talked about, the video supports that are provided through class, that when teachers say, well, what would that look like? What would that sound like? Looking at the video library and really analyzing what teachers are doing through some of those supports that class offers has been a wonderful addition to some of our professional development discussions. But we're a program that has a lot of professional development instructions. A lot of those are informal, but nonetheless, we have this library to go back to and kind of look at different domains and dimensions and really see, a class illustration there. It does take time. It's not something that happens overnight. And I will say that, when the state of Tennessee brought some of these pieces class to the table, sometimes as as district leaders, we want to say, oh, another evaluation or another a data collection set. Sometimes it feels like we have so much data coming our way, or so much data that we are trying to collect. In the way that we have been afforded the opportunity to use class in our program, I feel like the teachers have grown across the 5 years that we have been implementing class and reflecting on its data. I will say, prior to us implementing class, I had taken a full year to study our program with its stakeholders, and we had developed a mission statement. And through the stakeholder input, it really wasn't just a Melody Hobbs, philosophy or a mission statement for preschool. It was something I really wanted to be something that could be my legacy for that would carry the program past my leadership. And the timing of that mission statement was just perfect. And the outcome of the mission statement was just dovetailed so nice. Class just dovetailed so nicely into our agreed upon mission statement, which includes interactions, environment, playful learning, responsive, learning experiences. And so all three of those notions are wrapped up. We can see spaces within class to support our mission statement. So that's very helpful for me as a program leader and a community builder, right? As I'm, in the community in which I work, and speaking about the role of early childhood and what our program, the mission of our program, and where we sit, and then bringing some class information along with that as to support the quality of our program. So that mission statement just was a perfect timing. It just happened that way. I wish I could say it was planned. It's just how it kind of happened. And it's the mission statement is one that I go back to time and time again when I'm speaking with community leaders or district leaders. or other people across the state. And it's just a really nice framework for who we are as a program, and has set the stage for us to use a class as a reflective continuous improvement scale for us to own and to learn from.
Great. I think we're ready for the next slide, Gloria. And Melody has set this up beautifully to talk about just like having a framework that kind of works more flexibly depending on what the program, what they're coming to, whether it's their mission statement that's driving them to this space, or whether they're trying to think about, okay, we are going to do this thing called class. We're really invested in continuous quality improvement, but we also kind of need to know how it fits in with what we're already doing, how it won't feel like that one more thing, that's so deeply heavy, but also that it feels just empowering to say like, wow, this is that thing, that will help actually tie everything else together. Because we know that class is about interactions, and we know that you can't but help interact in an early childhood classroom. If you're teaching curriculum, if you are doing pickup, or you're taking them to lunch, there's interactions that are just bounding and happening all over the place. And so if it was void of interactions, we'd be having a different conversation, and we would never get to the outcomes that we're hoping to see in the other spaces. And so interactions really matter, and the class framework really fits into the CQI process, but also to Melody's point, it really has a nice fit and alignment to programs' mission statements, their visions, and what they really are trying to achieve, no matter what type of program. I think there's this commonality across early childhood, what we really believe children need and thrive with. And so I think that it has that nice alignment as well. But I'm a visual kind of person. I got to see it. And so I can hear folks talk about like, well, we have this and we have that. And what are the supports? Because I'm feeling overwhelmed. I want to do this thing, but like, what's there to help me? And so I just wanted to put together this visual and connect it to the Plan, Do, Study, Act, to classes framework, so that you can kind of make some connections, and then to connect you to some of the products and services. I won't do a deep dive into what each of the products and services are, but I want to call your attention to them, so that you might say, oh, I'm going to jot a note. I want to know more about that thing, what you talked about. I want to go deeper. I want to go to the website, Teachstone's website. I want to check that out. I want to talk to somebody about that. So that this will give you that big overview of that. And there's not a typo. I'm going to call this out. You're going to see a Plan, Do, Study, Act. That's intentional, because there's a lot of doing. Like we said, it's a continuous process. So to divide up the framework and to show alignment with the products and services, there was a little bit more to cover in the do, and there was a little bit of overlap, just to show that it's important to have that data collection ongoing, that we didn't want to just bucket that into, oh no, you just wait to get to the study part, because that wouldn't really be a true spirit of continuous quality improvement, that it's really ongoing. So it was really hard to put these in boxes. And if you're an early childhood person by nature, we don't often get into the box very well. we have all these exceptions, right? Because it's like Melody said, it's messy work. It's good, but it's messy and creative work and very innovative. So in the class framework, we've talked a lot about, you've even heard Melody talk about this in building a culture for continuous quality improvement, but it's this idea of establishing, maintaining a shared focus on creating, like this life-changing experiences for children through the lens of high quality, equitable interactions. So you might say, okay, I'm with you. That framework aligns with our mission statement, that aligns with what we're trying to do. The flexibility comes here. You might not need all these things right this moment. You might not even touch all of these things at once, but something here might resonate with you to say, that's where we need to start. Or we've already done that and this, we're ready for this. So that's where the flexibility for you to kind of focus on what it looks like for your own journey, for your own program, because we are all on a journey together, but we're at different places in that journey. So I would point you to this direction that I think Melody would also agree. We have really worked incredibly hard to bring leaders along, because leadership support matters deeply. It doesn't matter what kind of early childhood program that you're in. We need leaders to have that same shared understanding of what quality looks like and what we're aiming for. And she described it really well, that buzz in laboratory, like kids are doing many things at once, and oftentimes leaders come to the work without a deep understanding of early childhood. And so they're trying to make sense out of it. They're like, I don't know, like there's so much going on. There's pouring water over here. Someone's painting. Somebody's, trying to craft a story over here. Like, what are they all supposed to be doing? I've heard leaders say that, like, is this on target? Is this productive? Is this what's supposed to be happening in this moment? And so they too are looking for supports and resources to help them better translate, better understand what high quality learning, teaching, and interactions look like in the classroom so that they can turn around and better support their teachers in this space. And we heard from teachers the need for their leaders to have that, because I remember being in groups of talking with teachers and saying, we know that's the best way to teach. I know that. Can you tell our leaders? And then I would tell them, but you know what your leaders are telling me? They too want this information because they want the best support for you. So like bringing them together, class provided an opportunity and that shared language and lens and buy-in for teachers, leaders to have that. And so class primer for leaders is a great space to start with. Class primer for teachers. Teachers might say like, class is coming our way because of legislation or because our program opted, whatever reason class is coming your way or you want to try it. I need to know more about this. I want to know what when someone comes to my classroom, what are they looking for? Here's the best thing I'll tell you if you're having that moment right now. You're doing it already. And that's what I love about class. Class is about those interactions. And you already interact really well every day. Class just takes it to the next level and says, like, here's how you can move up those levels of your interaction. So it builds upon what teachers recognize and that they feel comfortable with, and they're already doing. It's not something like they have to stop doing and try something else. There's curriculum crosswalks for folks who are focused on, we're implementing curriculum. In Tennessee, we were in a space of that. We reduced curriculum. We had to support teachers to implement curriculum. Class was a great way to leverage that because curriculum can tell you the what of teaching, but sometimes teachers needed to know, like, what do I do with me during these times of like whole groups, small groups, learning centers? What do I do with the questions the curriculum gave me that might not be that open-ended? So like class was able to take them to another level to say, how can you take those same questions and maybe make them a little bit more open-ended or more higher on the critical thinking level? So that was really exciting to see. There's literacy and class support kits. Melody already gave like this hint about this, but there's that class video library. Oh my goodness, to see it in action, there's nothing more powerful. You could read about it, you could think about it, but to really see it, like, okay, tell me what this looks like in a real classroom with real teachers, with real kids. We can make the best laid plans and then kids show up and things look a lot different. So to really see it in action, teachers learn best by seeing that. And we've seen that as a powerful tool. You could also, like we've seen people do a kickoff with a custom summit. Like we're gonna do this big, kickoff to get everybody on board, offer all these things just as a driving our, process forward. You could do that if you're interested in that. Then in the do studies part, again, the classroom framework kind of anchors us in the process. Like, what do we do to have this reflective? We heard Melody talk about being reflective, being intentional, being consistent with what we're saying and how we're approaching it. And how do we measure? And this is my favorite part. How do you communicate what you're measuring? How do you share that out? Because that really matters. It matters what you do with the data and what the data says about the program and what teachers will take away from it and how they'll embrace this as a continuous quality improvement moment. So what's in that space? Well, we got to be able to measure it. That's for one thing. So there are some supports if you're like, well, we don't have that capacity yet. We don't have a tool, like we don't have someone that can go out today and do the tool like the class observation. So we have services at Teach can come do that for you. We have services where we could help you build local capacity to do that. There's reliability tools too, because it's important to be reliable. You don't want folks out there observing one way and observing another way. So really having that reliability matters. And this is a new offering that is so critical in this time and where we are in our space and thinking about equitable, high quality across programs and across, what we're doing. There's a training to just specifically address avoiding unconscious bias. Observers might, without even knowing it, might come with biases. We want to uncover those, and we want to make sure that we are recognizing what those are, supporting folks. There's the My Teach measurement and reporting suite. If you want to know everything data talk, data talk, how to share that, there's incredible resources there as well. And then the framework, just thinking about strengthening opportunities to improve ongoing feedback loops. They could be informal or formal. How do you just continue to drive impact, innovation, and just those data-driven investments? Melody talked about this takes time investment. It sometimes also is a big funding investment. Like people are pouring money into professional development or improving quality, but how do we make sure that we have the data behind there to show how we're doing and how we're progressing along the way? And so there again, you can see on the other side of this chart, class coaching trainings. I mean, like everyone benefits from having a coach, whether you are a mentor, a peer mentor, a coach, we all can get better at getting better. So there's opportunities for that. If you can't really have a physical coach, there's opportunities to have a virtual coach connection. And those are really amazing, because I think about equity in that. If I don't have a program that can afford a coach, how can I still have a coach and benefit from coaching? Class domain trainings, Melody talked about, like if a teacher recognizes like, I need, you know, I would like to focus on language modeling. Is there something that I could do or take a training towards that? So there are class domain specific trainings that you could elevate those up and work on those specifically. Class support kits, again, resources, coaching services, can't say enough about those. My Teach Your Own Learning resources, and last but not least, but powered by class trainings. I know that's a mouthful and this is barely touching a surface, but if you're interested in knowing how your process can be supported, there are resources and supports, because that's what's needed in the process as well. And all that to say that throughout the whole thing, there's this maintained focus on shared vision of quality, this continual, like measuring quality, and the commitment to ongoing data-driven improvements, following the data, what it's telling us, and supporting it along the way. So I'm going to kind of put a different hat on now. Gloria, if you'll go to the next slide. I'm going to briefly talk from my hat from being a state agency leader and talk about what is class and CQI across systems. Like what if someone was interviewing me today as the former assistant commissioner of early learning for Tennessee Department of Education, how would I kind of think through this slide? And then after I talk, I think it's really going to be powerful for you to hear then Melody, who then was coming from a district perspective of this same messaging. So this way it gives you that kind of system view of here's what a state agency is trying to do and their perspectives, and then how did the districts take and receive that? And she's one district. We know that there's lots of districts, but she'll be able to give a lot of insight there. So we've all together talked about a definition of CQI, but what can it mean for, overall systems when we think about that? So if I had to answer that, and I was on, Channel 5, and they were asking me to answer that question, and you don't have a lot of time. So this is what I would say. I even wrote it down, so I would be very brief. I said I would say that it's a clear, consistent, aligned focus on what matters the most. And it provides improvement supports that work together to move quality at all levels of the system in ways that benefit all children, teachers, and families. So that's what I think when it's done really well, what it can do. There's some challenges. Of course, there's always challenges that turn into opportunities. But I would say that challenges, when we first took a look at this, we thought about, okay, well, no two districts are the same. No two programs are the same. We had varying views about what quality is, where we are in the quality. We know that in any given program, quality could look different from classroom to classroom in one building, let alone from school to school in one space or in one region of the state. So we knew that the challenge would be is like to come in and have, how do you establish this shared language? So like, how do we have a clear single focus that people have buy-in and that it resonates with them? So narrowing the focus is super helpful, because then you can have something to stick to and at when you do professional development, so that's not clouded by too many things at once. Sometimes you have no control over that. Like we had lots of things coming at us at the same time we were trying to move this work. We had new curriculum. We had a new student growth portfolio kind of assessment piece. So there was lots of moving pieces. And so if the ideal world, we would have done one thing at a time, but it's not always possible. But class, again, provided an opportunity to bridge so many of those things. I would say another thing is like data systems that don't talk to each other. It could be a challenge. School systems collect data in a system, early childhood childcare programs collect data somewhere in their systems, but it seems like there's this disconnect that they don't seem to talk to each other. I remember thinking about pre-K saying, I would love to have the data from when they were infants to before they came to me. What knowledge I would have, but the data systems didn't talk to each other, right? So there's a challenge. If we can kind of come to that and where data could be housed and more integrated, that would be amazing. I know states are working on that and making progress towards that. I think another challenge, and we've kind of mentioned this, is like how data is shared and used for what purposes. Because in the best spirit of things, if it's shared out in a way that doesn't support the work and acknowledge the growth that's happening and the work that's yet to be, it could undermine and it could defeat kind of the bigger purpose of those things. And really the challenge of having leadership buy-in at all levels of the system to support the work. We need everybody from the commissioner down and across systems talking the same way about what quality early learning looks like, because at the end of the day, we're all getting them kindergarten ready. And so we need to have kind of a shared vision of what that looks like and what that means. And then I just think that those challenges, again, can turn into some opportunities. And I would say at this Tennessee State Department of Education, we turn those into opportunities, and we really embrace that opportunity to have a shared vision, language, and approach to quality. And you might say that sounds a little fluffy. What does that mean in practice? So even from the program evaluators, as we affectionately call them, the state is here. You know, that moment in your program where you're like, they're here to to do their visit. We even transform that to be like, they're not only looking at the monitoring pieces, but also really being a source of quality support for them. Those program evaluators, they actually became class reliably and trained so that they too would have the shared language and lens to look at our programs, so that all of us from the system that we've created, we're talking and looking at quality from the same way. And I'll give a huge shout out to Misty Moody and her team. Misty Moody is now serving as the interim assistant commissioner for early learning, and they continue to plug away at this, continue to provide support. And by doing that, we were able to support programs that needed to measure their progress along the way, giving them capacity because these program evaluators could step in and do some of the observations for them. Other programs, built that for themselves. And then really tying the data-driven professional development. I love this part as a state leader. We were always trying to say, like, what do they need? What kind of professional development opportunities should we provide? We could follow the class data and give them very specific things that they needed and connect it to the same things they were working on. Like we mentioned earlier, curriculum connected to like the class and how class can leverage that. And I won't say enough about the targeted leadership resources and supports to really tap into those leaders. And Melody was one of those leaders I also got to work with, as well as she's a teacher. So I'm going to give it to her to talk about what does this look like from a district or a program perspective in this space.
Well, this is a great question. And as you were speaking, I was going through, many of the ups and downs of the past 5 years, particularly on the front end when we're thinking about continuous quality improvement. Like I said, I think most practitioners, most districts sit in that space. They're always wanting to get better. They're always wanting to do more to increase the quality of the educational opportunities, and equitable is included in that, to the children that they serve and the districts that they serve. But at first glance, when a new data system comes to a district, like I had said previously, it becomes a little like, ooh, I'm going to be really honest, like, oh, something else that we're going to have to implement or be evaluated by, or feel like we need to prepare for when those observations come through. So adjusting to and like learning about class was a big deal for me, because once I got into class, I understood how it really aligns with what we're doing in our particular program. But overcoming that barrier of just, now we've got someone else coming in to measure what we're doing. And sometimes at the district level, particularly in the classroom level, it can feel like a gotcha moment. Like people are coming in to see not the strengths, right? But see areas of improvement. And I think when we look at class, we really can start with what some of those strengths are that are happening within our classrooms, just like we do with what children need to learn. Like we start with what they can do really, really well. And then that helps us determine what they need to learn next. And so I come at it from my program in that direction too. Here is exactly what we do really well. And I have to say, I have to frame my program out to say, my program was in existence like long before Darlene was even in the picture. I mean, long time ago. And I was in the work a long time before, the state had come up with these different avenues of support. So sometimes programs can be around a long time and be focused on developmentally appropriate practice. Has always been at the forefront of my mind. When you speak of getting children ready for kindergarten, I don't think about it like that. I think about, what do 4-year-olds need to be doing as a 4-year-old so that they can successfully transition into kindergarten? That's exactly what our mission statement says too. And class helps us to know what teachers should be doing, how they should be responding and interacting with 4-year-olds, so that 4-year-olds can do what 4-year-olds need to do, so that they can successfully transition into kindergarten and beyond. And so we use class to help us, again, reframe our teachers' back and forth responsive natures, which was already happening. It was already happening in our program, but there were ways to elevate this work, and class happened to be that. So once we had buy-in, once we had my buy-in, and the other thing is, I recognize from a teacher lens how difficult it is. These are not easy. They're not easy behaviors in classrooms with children who come from very diverse backgrounds. And so, but it's something to be mindful of. Some of the dimensions and the behaviors may not be at the forefront of our mind. Sometimes it's curriculum, and sometimes we just need to let some of the class back and forth behaviors bubble up to the front, and so that we can truly meet children where they are in a particular moment. And I think that's where teachers have the flexibility with class to know that they're following children's leads and looking for these opportunities to be responsive to young children. But it's that buy-in that needs to take place. And I think because the way our program is choosing to implement class, it gives teachers a lot of agency. And when I speak of teacher agency, it means teachers feel capable and confident in making changes in their own practice, rather than being just responsive to some data that someone has given them from the outside, but rather thinking about their own practice in a way that they can control, and in a way that they can set themselves goals and next step learning, and really empowering that teacher agency. I can't say enough about teacher agency and how class can help elevate teachers in making in the moment classroom decisions, as well as provoke them to want to know more about certain areas of their practice that they can come to know and to grow further. So that part of agency and ownership, I can really go down that rabbit hole for the next hour. I'm sure no one needs to know that, but it's a completely different mindset than a top-down kind of structure. And so once we embrace class in this way, the teachers could really own the data. The program owns the data, right? It's shared across the program in some spaces. We talk about program quality improvement. Sometimes it's classroom improvement, right? Teacher improvement, partner improvement within those classrooms. Once we see this as an opportunity for us to own the information and then grow from it, it's a completely different perspective than a top-down kind of purpose. So that's our particular use in our, it's nestled within this really nice program that we have developed, but class has really, over the past 5 years, has really become a part of our language, and has also been a part of my ability to communicate our program strengths, our program's goals, and connect teacher professional development at the local level on what we need to learn next, and really built this community of early childhood practitioners in my district that really support one another and speak a common language and can move each other forward and own their own data, so to speak.
Love that. Thank you for that, Melody. And I love that you touched on, and I know we're getting closer on time, but I love that you touched on the flexibility too, and for teachers to think deeply about, like how do we address those diverse cultures, and how do we show up and be very responsive to those, and how do we adjust our interactions and to really in a responsive way that supports all children and all educators in that space. So I appreciate that. Next slide, Gloria. So you might be thinking about, like, okay, Wow, we just heard a lot of stuff, and like I'm really deeply thinking about different components. So what are the next steps to take if you're interested in CQI with class? I invite you if you want to have continued thought partnership, you can certainly request to connect directly with me. I could talk to you. I could help you, like think through where your entry point is. There's a quick poll that Gloria has brought up here. So feel free to take that poll, and then we'll progress on to kind of tell you about some upcoming webinars in a teacher series event that I think Gloria is going to show in just a minute.
Yes, I will give it just a minute.
Perfect.
While we're waiting, though, there is a question that came in the chat, Darlene, that I think we'll have a minute to address. So in the chart that we discussed, and actually let me...
Probably the one that aligns the framework, the class framework.
Yeah, I want to show it on the screen, but I want this poll to go on for a little bit longer. But someone is asking, where does group coaching, MMCI, or class group coaching, where does that fit in the chart?
So, and really the chart has a lot of flexibility. So we were just putting some of the things, so it's not inclusive of all the offerings. So in that space, it could fall in the doing as well as the acting, because it's this continuous process. That's why I told you it was really hard to put things in boxes, because when you think about acting upon it, like if you're going to refine coaching and really really do a more intensive coaching, then it might fall, if you put it in the bucket of act, that might be where you are, but it depends on where you are in the process. You might have already started another cycle of continuous quality improvement, so you might have this laid out a little bit differently. It's not to say that that's not a critically important piece in an offering. Certainly is. I think it's just bucketed under all class coaching trainings in this chart. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you for that clarity. And like you mentioned, there are a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention before you leave us today. The first is that we do have an upcoming free virtual series. So on September 13th through 17th, we're offering a free virtual series designed to support early childhood teachers as they return to the classroom. So whether you're new to class or you're a class expert, there will be content for everyone. I have just a few of the sessions listed here, but there will be a full week worth of content. There will be sessions for infant, toddler, and pre-K teachers as well as Spanish sessions. So we're very excited about this series, and seats are filling up very quickly. So be sure to check out teachstone.com/events.
Gloria, just to clarify for folks, they don't have to, it's not like all day event. Like they can pop in, they can register and go to different sessions. It's not like you have to commit a whole week, but it's available. Yes. Is that correct?
Yes, great point. Yes. So each day it's only going to be 45-minute session. So that's geared towards teachers who don't have a lot of time. So you're not going to be spending the whole day sitting with us. It's just 45 minutes each day.
Although we would love their company, but we acknowledge they have some other things to do. So yes.
I believe my colleague will put the link in the chat. But finally, before you leave, we do have a webinar as well coming up focused on literacy. So how class interaction can fuel literacy outcomes. 2 more class experts will be joining us, Marie Carmen Pimentel and Sarah Haddon. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern Time next Wednesday. You can register for that with the same link as before, teachstone.com/events. Find the upcoming webinar and register for free. Okay, with that, I want to thank our panelists, Darlene and Melody. Your time is so greatly appreciated. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you all out there for using your valuable time to join us today. But that will wrap us up, and everyone take care, be safe, and have a good one. Goodbye.
Thanks all.